Today we are doing webinar 4 on long duration storage with one of my colleagues, Dominic Gonzalez, the smiley face on the screen. Dominic is ex-Abengoa, ex-Frost & Sullivan, and now very glad to have them in the Cresco team for the last year, focusing very much on decarbonisation solutions. Some of you might have seen some of these slides previously on some of the specific energy strategy work. I know it's titled long duration storage, but it's very much more around how do we fit storage type technologies within the net zero. It's not a technical discussion. We recently had a technical presentation from Sterling and Wilson 2 weeks ago, and we plan to have one from Mozilla in early September, which I think will ask the very specific questions. I think the output of today is very much around how do we put in these storage technologies that are maybe not either technically or financially or commercially proven into these net zero strategies. So thankfully, Dom, if you would continue. As per the normal format, I'm going to sort of run with a few questions near the end, and then if you could just please put questions into the chat, and then I will call out those questions, and if the individual would like to just elaborate on the question if it's not a yes, no. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dom.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Rob, and good afternoon to all. I know most of you, but perhaps not all of you. So thanks, Rob, for the introduction. I've had some experience in long duration storage with some of the CSP plants in South Africa using thermal energy storage, and also with some vanadium redox flow batteries, and also with green hydrogen. I was involved in a fuel cell pilot in Spain as of a year and a half ago. So we're going to jump straight in these 4 questions or 4 points. And really to unpack these each as we go along. I'm not going to read these out to you, but rather address them in the presentation. So jumping straight in the last few months in 2022, we've seen long duration storage finally come to play in the headlines in both sort of very technical and energy focused journals, and then of course very sort of mainstream media such as The Economist, etc. And I think that the New Yorker poses a very important question, or a very insightful question, and that is, can gravity, pressure, and other elemental forces save us from becoming a battery-powered civilization? So in the last 3 years, 2/3 of new power generation assets coming online have been solar and wind. As we all know, that's all variable. There's been a lot of work and there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion going ahead with lithium-ion batteries and with green hydrogen. We believe that has dominated the news cycle, and as a result has dominated interest. And a lot of our clients are, of course, modeling a lot of these things, but we're also seeing increasing complexity in the need to develop a fully functional, practical net zero power system. So that's what we want to get into today. Excuse me that this is blocking the slide over here, but as you can see, this is quite a trend. We're going to see a lot of it in the next 1 to 2 years, and we really want to unpack what does it mean for your business. So from the very general to the very specific, there are now sort of work underway in Australia, Chile, Canada, etc., about citing some long duration storage in mining applications and other aspects like that. So jumping to the next slide. So most of you have seen this. It's one of our generic slides, but just to very quickly point out, as we're transitioning to a net zero power system, we are resulting in a big shift from fossil fuels to mining, and of course it's hardware that's ultimately creating renewables and batteries and energy storage, as well as software. Projects are getting smaller, more decentralized, etc. And so energy storage is critical to manage different forms of variation. So most of you are either in this first box or in the second box. Nobody is on that third box yet. And the point we want to mention, as you all know very well, you can achieve some energy savings by installing just wind and solar. You can then optimize that or increase your renewables penetration or scope 2 emissions by incorporating BESS, usually lithium-ion BESS, which is fairly well commercialized at this point, and then become the 2 next parts of the equation, which is long duration storage, which includes pump storage hydro and then green hydrogen. So we want to, get to those points and really unpack that as we go along. So to the first question, what will replace coal and gas? Is it going to be long duration batteries or long duration energy storage, or low carbon load following technologies such as clean gas, such as clean hydrogen, or is it going to be a combination of both? So as we're moving from 25% renewables, which generally one is able to save money and improve operations from a financial point of view, to what's currently the sweet spot of what's technically and commercially possible is 60% using a mixture of solar, wind, and batteries, to how do we get to this 100% renewables? Now, in the States and in Europe, that's a bit of a different equation to what we're used to in Southern Africa. Those are liberalized markets. They are purchasing more RECs, or renewable energy credits, purchasing excess PPAs, and there's a lot of trading that's going on. But that's changing. And we have a slide in terms of what's happening in Europe right now with, of course, the issue in Ukraine and Russia, and how that's affecting the view on whether liberalized energy markets are able to actually solve issues like autonomy going forward. So the graph on the right is quite important. It's going to frame the discussion for us. I think that as we are putting more renewables onto the grid, it's presenting us with three main challenges. Ultimately, there's a decrease in system inertia, and batteries and energy storage have been the main mechanism proposed to solve that issue. Of course, supply and demand do not always match, and this is resulting in, into different elements of flexibility that's needed to build out the system. So typically speaking, lithium-ion batteries can only provide power for around 4 to 6 hours. They can be stretched and oversized up to around 8 hours. After then, it becomes very technically complex and commercially expensive to do so. So what we need to build into our net zero power systems as we're planning them is different types of long duration storage technologies that can build in flexibility between 8 hours to up to 150 hours and even more. Two important points to mention. What we've seen recently, last year in Germany was a very unwindy a couple months of the year, and a lot of the wind fleet performed substantially less than what was signed on the PPAs, what was conducted on all of the wind modeling, etc. And just this April, there was another weather anomaly in Spain and Portugal and southern France, where Sahara sands went across the Sahara Desert and blanketed a lot of Portugal, Spain, and parts of France with sand. And Spain is around 2/3 of their daylight peak of their daylight production is on solar. So that pretty much wiped out the solar fleet for a few days while they had to clean the panels, repair, etc. So Spain, actually, some regions went into load shedding because so much of that was reliant on solar, which is not dispatchable, which is variable. So therefore, long duration storage is being seen as a mechanism to provide flexibility, to provide energy security, which has really come to force this year as a main driver, and decarbonization and net zero. So we're going to unpack that going forward. The main way to look at things, to look at the differences between normal batteries and long duration energy storage batteries, is what they're able to provide. So they are providing very different use cases and very different applications. The main one that we've highlighted there as a general view, is that lithium-ion batteries are able to provide peaker plant displacement. They're able to a lot of, the other use cases there as well. But whereas long duration energy storage is being seen largely to be able to replace coal and gas, especially in areas where there's no hydro, where maybe nuclear might be complex, etc., where biomass also might be complex. And really, as we're moving forward, what we are seeing is that as solar and wind takes place, we're needing to find ways to replace this dispatchable power or baseload assets.
So, Dom, sorry to interrupt. Apparently, some people are getting some connection issues. I seem fine. Do you want to just switch off your camera just to help on your side, just in case?
Yes. Sorry about that. Hopefully, it's better now. Lithium-ion batteries can provide, frequency-controlled power regulation, spinning reserves, etc., backup power, and of course, time of use shifting. But it's really long-duration storage that's going to enable us to get up to 100% renewables, or as close to. And if you look at the South African context, 22 gigawatts of coal assets are projected to be taken off the grid. We don't have a lot of sort of hydro capacity in the region, the ability to build other forms of generation. So, this is really sort of going to be either lithium, green hydrogen, or long duration, at least playing a role in the system going forward. So various things that we will unpack as we move across here. there are 4 different types of long duration storage in terms of the categorization, but basically anything that's able to store and dispatch power longer than 6 hours is generally considered a long duration storage grouping of technologies. The important point to mention here is that some of them are very newfangled technologies that have just been or are being commercialized using all sorts of new ways to do things. And that, of course, has impacts on the bankability, technology readiness level, etc. Whereas others are just really a bit of a rehashing of existing technology and using very conventional, well-known processes such as thermal and mechanical processes. So, you know, thermal energy storage has been coupled with CSP for more than 25 years, is working excellently in most of the projects that have gone ahead. Flow batteries have been around for some time, but there have been some improvements taking place lately, which we'll get into later on. Then, of course, pump storage hydro, you know, is also has been deployed for decades and is now having a resurgence due to its ability to dispatch power, especially when coupled with renewables as a sort of a fully clean process. And then there's new technologies such as compressed air energy storage has also been around for a while in different forms, but the technology is advancing. So is liquid air energy storage, and then hydrogen is classified as chemical, which we'll get onto in a moment. So just very quickly, I mean, we're now seeing that batteries are quite a defined global market. It's around 17 gigawatts of batteries, you know, was the installed base globally a couple of years ago. It's around 10 gigawatts on grid and 7 gigawatts off grid. We'll soon have our first big battery in South Africa, the Scatec project that was signed in the Northern Cape. It's just under 5 hours of lithium battery, 1,000 megawatt hours coupled to a 500 megawatt PV plant. So that's all very encouraging for the region. Globally, we're seeing a lot of hybrid projects go ahead with both lithium and long duration storage coupled together, and we'll get into that. So yeah, on the right there, you can see the different levels of market readiness per technology. There's about 2 months ago, the data came out that around 180 long duration energy storage deals have been closed, and there's a big mixture of financing available there, from sort of venture capital through to sort of debt, private equity funding as well, in different size projects. But this is something that's growing very fast, and we will increasingly see the need for it.
So maybe, Dom, I can just make a comment there. This, as you can see, most of them, it's only really the Scatec one at the bottom that's South Africa specific, linked to the medium-term risk mitigation program, which is great that that's gone into place. But on a recent private sector RFP that we're involved in, the firm bids were all lithium ion. We had lots of marketing documents on long duration storage batteries, but the EPCs that we were going to put in place weren't as yet willing to put their performance guarantees behind the technologies. Speaking to a few EPCs, they believe that will change shortly, but at the moment, you know, large scale project finance or EPC taking risk on long duration, I think it's still early days. It's probably coming in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And yes, I can confirm that I was involved in the Vametco project mentioned here, which is a hybrid mini grid using vanadium redox flow batteries with PV. And I can state that from the commercial point of view, very difficult to ensure the wrap and coordination of all the guarantees, etc., between the EPC, IPP, and OEM. So these things are taking time as these projects in different levels of commercialization. But they, you know, certainly the EPCs and integrators are gearing up to be able to handle that, and these issues are being sort of taken forward. So yeah, just a couple examples here. I'll go quite quickly through this and get onto the meat of it. But you know, there has been quite a lot of battery and hybrid projects being installed in the mining sector in Africa as the world's largest sort of remote grid market. And that's where we see the most attractive deployment due to the high cost of diesel and off-grid. But also equally in places like South Africa, where we've got an unstable grid, and of course it can address multiple concerns. So globally, a lot of the analysis is pointing to that aspect that we are seeing the biggest need for large mining and large industrial companies, as well as tech companies as well. You know, Amazon and the like have also been taking a keen interest in developing these aspects, and quite a few of the tech companies. But yeah, so really it's being driven by aggressive or progressive, I should say, net zero targets, and the need to reach this higher levels of renewables penetration. So you know, this is where we're seeing it going forward, taking its place. And I think that the fact that most long duration storage are able to decouple energy and power is a key advantage that it has over lithium-ion batteries. So we believe this region of Southern Africa is a prime region where this is going to grow. This slide here is showing Cresco's view based on our experience of analyzing more than sort of 200 bids, or quite substantially more than that, excuse me, over the last couple of years. But this modeling from our side excludes LDS, and you can see the outcome when LDS is not included in the analysis. So you can maybe get up to 70-80% penetration if you're an off-grid operation, but if you're on-grid, it's generally still 60-65. But if you want to get up to 100, overstacking lithium batteries and also over-dimensioning PV and wind starts to really skew the financial and sort of technical approach. And that's where it's coming in handy to start looking at LDS from all perspectives. This is a McKinsey slide on some recent analysis done with some long-duration energy storage companies, and I want to unpack this a little bit, and this is really getting up to the third question, which is how does long-duration storage, or how should it be analyzed with lithium and with green hydrogen? So as you can see on this graph, and quite interestingly, this is really how we see things going forward, which is that as we need to sort of enhance and make our energy systems more sophisticated, we're going to have multiple energy generators and also multiple storage technologies. And we're seeing a lot of new projects being developed and designed these days that are looking sometimes at 2 or 3 or even sometimes more different types of storage to address the different levels of flexibility needed in the system, whether it's seasonal, whether it's multi-day, or whether it's sort of hourly, or just to manage that sort of frequency control and regulation. So this is obviously projections going forward based on different considerations of whether these technologies will have a steep learning curve or steep pricing, medium or high. As I say, we really see the long duration storage grouping of technologies as something that's complementary with both lithium and green hydrogen. And in several projects globally in Scotland and California, we've seen them being coupled together, as well as in recent designs in Chile and also China. So it's really about complementarity, not around one being better than the other. Cresco's view on green hydrogen, and firstly a bit of the personal view from my side, having worked with hydrogen before. I was involved in a fuel cell project in Spain, and we actually managed to halve the capex of the project. It was quite sort of a famous Horizon 2020 project. We managed to use a lot of raw material or cheaper raw materials and engineering and optimization to halve the capex, but the cost is still extremely high. And ultimately, there's a lot of things that need to go ahead at the same time in order for green hydrogen to realize its cost reduction, its learning curves, basically. So right now, different sources will tell you different things, but the homogenized view from our perspective, it's currently around sort of, as a rough benchmark, $8 to $9 a kg to produce green hydrogen in sort of Western Europe. That, of course, can be, cheaper if you are using, if you're leveraging certain existing infrastructure, etc. But curiously, the McKinsey review is stating that a high cost would be around $1 a kg, and that to achieve a lower cost, one would need to use salt caverns, etc. So we really do believe that in the latest context of the global situation with rising supply chain costs, with inflation, with all of these things, that we all hope that green hydrogen will reach affordable rates to provide low carbon, load following. But there's a lot of things that need to happen all aligned at the same time. And if you pull out one of those things, you do de-risk the whole picture of that becoming an option. So that's why we think that there's an increasing trend and need to develop this type of long duration energy storage, and often it's much more simple infrastructure and simple technology to do the same thing or to do a similar thing. So green hydrogen is essentially, I think, favored by all because it's both sort of a renewable energy and storage and a gas, and so there's not a lot of lobby sort of against that, and it's something that's very positive if it's all going to happen at the same time. But realistically, we're seeing that this medium-term storage that can be solved by some of these long-duration storage should be getting analyzed and actually are or should be able to provide affordable, highly decarbonized power systems going forward. So that's where a lot of the work is being conducted to date. Rob, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so I think I mean, if you just look at typical PV today, where the prices are bouncing all over the place, and bids that we had prices in February are now very different to today, and we'll figure out what the prices will be in December. So for me, there's no silver bullet. It's all about incremental gains. So if you take PV, it's sort of the capex price, the opex price, the cost of funding, the tax benefits, and all that sort of stuff, ultimately ending up in a tariff. For me, hydrogen and the other storage are exactly the same way and same considerations. It's about incremental gains and where they're going from there. Thank you. Tom, I think you slipped through too many slides.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, I'm going to go back to that other slide. I thought it's a good opportunity to talk about these learning rates while we're on the subject. So we all know about the huge drop in PV pricing achieved until 2019, and now the hiccup that's happened in the last couple of years. That's a result of sort of global forces around supply chain disruptions, inflation, etc. So these projections are obviously dependent on how the world is going to stabilize after this sort of disruption, and obviously how long some of these things take to stabilize. But we are seeing a lot of the input costs that this is where a lot of the area of focus is to actually substitute some of the rare earth minerals and critical minerals with more available materials. So one of the biggest trends we're seeing at the moment happening in the vanadium space, two main trends happening there. The one is that flow batteries were dominated by vanadium until very recently. And there's a lot of sort of small vanadium redox flow companies developing or using vanadium as the main source. Now there's new companies and sort of large existing companies that are looking to substitute that with iron, zinc, and salt. So examples are large players that have come into the picture, such as Honeywell, such as Lockheed Martin, etc., that are using flow battery mechanics and flow battery, etc., but substituting vanadium with cheaper materials. And of course, we're seeing that also in the lithium space as it's fragmenting it out into substrate sort of chemistries. So that's where a lot of the efforts are being driven at the moment. And then, we are seeing technologies focus on very specific niche areas, such as, Form Energy focusing just on system flexibility with very large, very long duration, which should almost be called trickle down or slow trickle duration rather than long duration if it's looked at in that way. But all of these things are being developed to address different needs. So these will have different learning curves. There's very different technologies here in the mix that will able to do different things. I'm going to go back to a case study that I was involved on, and this shows that this project is operational. It's a 4-technology project. It's CSP plus PV, 210 megawatts, providing 17 hours of storage. So this is operational in Chile in the Atacama Desert, 93% energy availability factor. I know that you're all thinking CSP, discard that, and it is true that I certainly do believe that standalone CSP is somehow obsolete or outdated going forward. But now what's happening is that's being hybridized with PV. So what you're doing is CSP is providing the storage, or at least the long-term storage by the molten salt storage tanks, and PV in the day is providing the cheapest form of generation. So the newest projects that have been developed after this project on this slide have even gone a step further, and what they are actually doing is actually connecting PV also to the molten salt thermal energy storage by coupling it with an electric heater. Now, the engineers in the room will know that that's an extremely inefficient process, but at the same time, the financial people in the room, who might have been acquainted with some of these figures, will realize that actually it's, you can actually get to a lot of cost reduction by doing that. So all of these things around hybridization, creating smarter systems, is enabling us to produce cheaper, low carbon baseload, or at least dispatchable generation. This 93.5% there is better than a combined cycle gas turbine plant, a CCGT, and the tariff is only around R1.15 to sort of R1.19 per kilowatt hour, which I would dare say is quite affordable in the Southern African context, if one can get over the extremely high sort of unpalatable capex cost to do this. And of course, this was resolved in this project actually by structuring the project with 4 off-takers. It was 4 mining off-takers in Chile. They structured it through the national grid, which enabled these 4 companies to pay long-term PPAs for this project and get that price for dispatchable clean energy. So going forward, we believe that these type of configurations will go ahead, and there's a lot of work being done to improve sort of PV coupling with electric heaters to molten salt, etc., and all of these things. Also coupling in with wind with these systems, and also then having standalone thermal energy storage, the 2 giant salt tanks, which there's a lot in operation today. So this is an exciting space to be observing. Very different technologies. We believe that the holy grail is still pumped storage hydro. There's been a resurgence of interest globally and also in the Southern African context in order to try and a bit of a gold rush to find a good pumped hydro site, for which there's not many. But there are now companies looking to replicate that kind of process by pumping sort of water up and down sort of valleys, etc. So there's a lot of work being done with these different technologies, and we are seeing that the mining sector globally and the heavy industrial sector globally is focusing a lot on trying to see, can you use existing infrastructure in order to enable these things? Because what we're trying to do is quite, in theory, quite simple, simply to store and dispatch energy using non sort of lithium-ion battery technology. But there's all sorts of things, some very outlandish and then others extremely simple. I'm looking to develop this new market. So as we're going forward, we're going to see these technologies come to play. We believe that it's going to bring us all some hope, because we've seen how if this is not modeled, if this technology option did not exist, it's very difficult to achieve net zero, or at least a highly decarbonized power system, without this medium-term duration of storage. So there's a bunch of slides that we have that we'll include in an appendix. I think not enough time to maybe go through them now. But what we've seen in the latest modeling of LDS systems and in our work that we've been doing as well, policy mechanisms are still needed to make a lot of these technologies make sense. But this is very fast changing. And because this is quite ad hoc projects, ad hoc technologies, and require a lot of customization to see where they can be sited effectively, etc. We believe that there might be latent opportunities for some of our clients, for some of yourselves in the Southern African space, to look at what you have on your site and look to leverage that. And that is very much in line with latest thinking of just energy transition, asset recycling, circularity, of all of these kind of things. So as we move forward with that level of the sort of circular economy and all of these things, we encourage us all, I think, to look deeper at what we have and what might be used, that might be able to shave off quite a lot of capex with with installing some of these things on site, or using some sort of minerals or materials, etc., whether one might have access to certain materials going into this process, or certain natural things that can enable a cheaper form of gravity storage, to be used at your site, which can ultimately result in much, more competitive electricity pricing, and therefore competitiveness overall to your site. So there's a lot of strategic thinking and systems thinking regarding the sort of asset recycling, and the need to do 2 things, which is really to try and encourage whatever policy mechanisms can be brought in, including green financing, climate financing, etc. Perhaps co-development, bringing on board different types of financing to reduce that cost and share the risk and load. And then at the same time, there's obviously a lot of pilot funding available for these technologies. And then, of course, to leverage whatever you have in terms of your existing assets, to look at deploying this on your operations, or perhaps getting access to a site nearby. So, yeah, these are just some considerations that we have. In Europe at the moment, all the talk is about whether Europe is going to experience load shedding this winter. That's ironic for all of us Southern Africans in the room, being used to that for so long. But this is now a global issue, between climate change, weather events, between war events, between all of these things. The conversation has shifted from being just about energy transition to being energy transition and energy security globally. So we need to both decarbonize our power systems, while ensuring that we keep the lights on globally. And we have seen, as I say, this sort of fragmentation happening in Europe has caused a trigger response by the European Union to provide 600 gigawatts of solar and wind by 2030. And of course, that's going to require a huge amount of green hydrogen, of lithium, and long duration energy storage to fill the gap. We've seen the state of California launch the need for 10 gigawatts of long duration storage. We've seen also the city of New York has recently launched a program for technology agnostic long duration storage, 10 to 12 hours. We're seeing projects going ahead in Scotland and Australia, in Chile, etc. And we've seen very little go ahead yet in Southern Africa, where impressively, the business case is actually quite attractive. So we think it's only a matter of time. We think that this is a package or a grouping of technologies that we all should be thinking about. And I think that the main thing is it's sort of customization, to look at it through your sites and to see if and when it might make sense. Yeah, just as a very final slide. Sorry, Robin, if you want to interrupt me there.
No, I think I've finished off. I mean, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so just a final slide. There's a lot of global benchmark, or not a lot. There is global benchmark data out there on these different technologies and these different technology providers. I don't want to use the phrase, sort of take it with a pinch of salt, but obviously these are non-cited technologies or non-cited benchmark costs. They also are costs from, that are projected by each of these companies from 2025 or in one case 2023. So, certainly an optimistic view from these companies, and I think the analysis done by Bloomberg Energy Finance here and perhaps also by McKinsey as well. But the point is, we do believe that that this is a key area to look at, and in some of these areas, the pricing has in fact resulted in quite attractive. So we are certainly doing increasing work here at Cresco to unpack some of these and try and localize some of these technologies and some of these applications for the Southern African application, and that's a lot of the work that we're going to be doing going ahead. So yeah, Rob,
thanks, Dom. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot in that. The purpose was to, I guess, show people, open their eyes to what's out there. I don't think Cresco has a preferred technology. We're conscious that it's a bit of everything will work. But I mean, how would you suggest some of our clients investigate this? Because I know the clients are getting various one pages. I know a guy reading articles. How do you understand what's real and what's not real? Because if you read the press, everything's being implemented, but if you actually went to site, you'd be surprised at not much in the ground. So what are you suggesting we do in terms of allowing clients to understand what's real and what's not real in this space? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly where we are today. And as Rob mentioned, we're seeing a lot of throwaway pricing and optimistic, pricing, which is also partially because, I think that in these types of very customized or customizable technologies, one needs a lot of details, not a lot of details, but certain details in terms of what your operation would need these technologies to do. Are they able to reach the sort of round trip efficiencies and the discharges, etc.? Are they able to reach the technical configurations? Is there enough, space to site them? So a lot of the prices are indeed, sort of throwaway prices when one does launch a sort of an RFI process, because there's just it's so basic that that there's not enough engagement needed to flesh it out. And I think that's not necessarily anybody's fault at all, but it's simply a matter of us all really needing to put our heads in this and understand what the technology is and what it isn't, what it can and can't do. And having a series of engagements with these very different types of technologies and solutions providers, and seeing and really kicking the tires and seeing if maybe there is application, on some of the operations that we're working with, etc. So, the approach that we are going for is to launch a technology challenge, a sort of an innovation challenge, or a sort of a competition. This is something that's being done a lot in innovation and R&D circles. And there's recently been a couple that have been launched in Australia with different types of sort of new solutions. And what we really want to do is encourage engagement and encourage these companies to give serious submissions, not sort of throw away RFI bids. We really want to scope it out a little bit clearly for them. We want to engage with them. We want to have discussions with them, and we really want to flesh out some of these potential opportunities, and also give them some insights of what our clients need to see if their technology can be used or perhaps adapted for any of these elements. So we're going to be running a process soon, a sort of an RFI, but as I mentioned, more what we're calling a long duration storage decarbonization challenge to really test the market for this, but in a much more engaging and open way than a typical RFI, a less sort of formal procurement process, and really designed to encourage engagement. And as you know, we of course are doing a lot of transaction advisory work, and we have highly developed evaluation and adjudication methodology. We've been all discussing internally and developing further how to adapt those quite, let's say, stricter processes for this type of new technology to enable flexibility, to enable understanding, etc. And really what we want to do is bring together potential off-takers and buyers with potential solution providers to really see if we can get some of these types of solutions and technologies. We can see more real costings, even though it's all going to be still, there's going to be some range in those costings, but to see what the technology can indeed do. So we want to stimulate some constructive discussions and thereafter host some workshops and tailor these between potential prospective buyers with prospective solutions providers. And so we're in touch with these companies. Some of them have been actively looking in Southern Africa. Some haven't got there at all. So we're definitely thinking that, we definitely see that the local market is getting a partial view on what's out there. And we'd really like to stimulate that, because we believe that it would make everybody's life certainly a lot easier, if one can start showing that it might be possible to get to net zero targets and renewable energy targets that have been corporately set sooner with some of these types of technologies. So very much a precursor to any competitive procurement, certainly not an RFI, not an RFQ. We're looking to invite several players into this process, which can also reduce costs, and it can also stimulate, perhaps greater response from these companies. So we're looking to replicate that type of challenge approach that's been done quite well in Australia, and there's recently also been one that's been launched in Peru as well. Rob, if you have anything more to add on that.
No, I think that covers nicely. So I mean, we are engaging with certain clients on this, hoping to get a few clients to chip, getting together so there's benefits in that. But yeah, we look forward to progressing. I think we will move to questions. I did see Byron's hand up earlier. Byron, I don't know if we answered your question or you.
Yeah, just a question on the
question there. Yeah.
On the Atacama project, what technology they use to convert the CSP to electricity?
I mean, yeah, so it's a general, it's standalone CSP technology that can work it can work in isolation. So it's the standard CSP technology that's being deployed, in the Northern Cape, very similar to the latest Kena Solar One project deployed by Abengoa. It's using a central receiver tower. And then it's using the mirrors as per the Key Solar One, sort of project, and then that's being sent to the thermal energy storage molten salt tank. So yeah, it's conventional electricity production, but then coupled with the PV. I could give you more information on that after that, Byron. I can send you a more detailed fact sheet on the technology and the sort of system overview.
But is it like an ORC
turbines?
ORC
Sorry?
Or...
Normally it's steam turbines.
It's steam turbines, yeah, exactly. Not ROC, yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah, I think they were Siemens steam turbines installed in that one.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I noticed there aren't any in the chat, but put up your hand and happy to take some. Okay. So then I think, thank you, Dom, for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Cresco will be releasing links to the 5 webinars. So we have one more next week through our website, and you'll be able to download the webinars and the presentations and engage accordingly. And we'll send a little wrap up for everyone. We'll also send through next week the following 5 webinars or 6 webinars that we plan to do for the rest of the month. And hopefully you're getting value out of this, and we look forward to future engagement. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.